Hello my dear students and my dear friends. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Top Lesson for You. Dear friends, we are discussing about the blood supply of the upper limb. So in the previous lecture I discussed about the subclavian artery, right? And in this lecture we are going to record about the axillary artery, the branches of it, right? As we are moving forward, we are supplying blood to the upper limb. So we should know from the origin point about its blood supply. It is not important that you should discuss from the brachial artery in the branches, because upper limb starts from here, from the shoulder joint, right? So we should have some basic knowledge about the origin of this blood supply of the upper limb. So in the previous lecture I have discussed about the branches of the subclavian artery, and now in this lecture going forward we will discuss about the branches of this auxiliary artery, right? So let's begin our lecture. Before starting lecture, friends, it's a humble request that if you are watching our lecture for the first time, please, it's a humble request that please subscribe our channel. Thank you so much. Let's discuss about auxiliary artery and its branches, right? So auxiliary artery, what is auxiliary artery? It is an artery which exists in the axillary region, right? It's the first point. And then we say that it is an artery which is a branch of the subclavian artery. We will say like this: axillary artery begins from here. Look carefully. Axillary artery begins from the lateral region of this first rib, right? So it begins from here up to here. So this is our axillary artery. It is a branch of the subclavian artery. What is auxiliary artery? It is a branch of subclavian artery. Okay, very good. What does it do? It supplies blood to the pectoral region, to the posterior part, to some parts of the scapula, to the humeral region, to the humerus bone, and some other parts. Also we will see in this the branches, right? So what is the origin of this artery? From where does this artery arises? So this artery arises from the outer border of the first rib, from the outer border of the first rib, right? It arises at outer border of first rib or costal bone, right? What is its diameter? So its diameter is about 6.83 millimeters, 38 millimeter, right? And what is its length? So its length is about 11.3 centimeters, 11.3 centimeters, right? From here, as I have drawn this diagram, it's a big diagram. It is not the real anatomical diagram, but it's for clear understanding. As our auxiliary artery begins from this point, and it moves up to here, right, up to axilla. So it's about 11.3 centimeter. Here we have drawn it a little larger to understand clearly all the branches, right? So it was its length. Now into how many parts this artery has been divided? You can see here that I have divided this artery into three parts. Look, from this lateral border or outer border of this first rib up to here, this is the first part, right? And from this here up to here, this is the second part, and from here up to the last part, this is the third part of this artery, right? So this artery, this auxiliary artery, is divided into three parts. So okay, let me write here, it is divided into three parts. Why are we dividing this artery into three parts? Because we can see that from all these parts different branches of arteries arise. That's why we have divided it for clear understanding, for it to understand it easily, right? So from the first part there are two, there is only one artery which arises. From the second part there is one artery and one trunk, and from the third part there are three arteries arises, right? From first part one artery, from second part two arteries, from third part three. So first part one artery, second part two arteries, third part three arteries. It's very easy, right? So let's see all those branches. Let me first discuss branches of first part. Branches of first part. So from first part there is only one artery which arises, and this is called the superior thoracic artery, right? From first part there is superior thoracic artery. You can see here, dear friends, this is our superior thoracic artery. Let me label it here. Okay, where should we label it? This is our first part, and this artery which arises from the first part of this auxiliary artery, this is called the superior thoracic artery. Okay, clear, the first artery. Then from the second part there are two arteries which arises, right? So let me write here branches from second part, right? So from second part there are two arteries. The first one is this one. This is a very we can also call it is a trunk, right? Because it gives rise to four further arteries, right? So we can say it's a trunk, or we can also say it's an artery. It doesn't matter. So this is called the thoracoacromial artery, right? Thoraco, it gives blood to the thorax region. Acromial means it gives also blood to the scapula and acromial region, right? So we say that the first branch from the second part of this auxiliary artery is this one, and this is called the thoracoacromial artery. Thoracoacromial artery, right, friends? This thoracoacromial artery gives further four branches, right? Thoracoacromial artery will give further four branches, and you don't have to worry about them. I will mention, I have drawn this diagram for you guys so that you guys could understand all these branches clearly, and I hope you are making sense from these arteries and from these branches and this diagram, right? So you can see here this artery, this is our thoracoacromial artery. Let me label it here. This will be our thoracoacromial artery. I hope you can see it. This is thoracoacromial artery, right? Now see all these four branches which rises from it, right? This first branch is going towards the clavicle bone. That's why we call it clavicular artery. Look carefully. This is our thoracoacromial. As we move further forward, this branch arises from it, and it moves a little bit far posterior to the clavicle bone, right? So look, here will be our clavicle bone, right? So this artery will give blood to the lateral part of the clavicle bone. That's why we call it clavicular artery. So the first artery which arises from the thoracoacromial artery is the clavicular artery, right, friends? Okay, it was easy. The second branch which arises, look, this one. Here are pectoral muscles, right? These are the pectoral muscles. So this branch is coming towards the pectoral muscles. That's why we call it pectoral artery. So the second branch from the thoracoacromial artery is the pectoral artery. Clear? The third branch, this one is going towards the acromion process of this scapula, right? That's why we say that this is acromial artery. The third artery is the acromial artery. Done with it, right? And this fourth artery is going towards here's a muscle which is called the deltoid muscle, right? So this artery little bit supplies blood to the deltoid muscle. That's why we call it deltoid artery. Deltoid artery. Right. So these are the four branches which arise from the thoracoacromial artery. I hope you can understand this from all these arteries from this diagram, and you can easily make the diagram, right? So if you want to make the diagram, you can watch that diagram, you can see that diagram and Natter's anatomy. So I hope it's making sense to you guys, right? Then we move forward and see the second branch which arises from the second part of this axillary artery, and this branch is called the lateral thoracic artery. So the second branch which arises from the second part of the from the axillary artery, that is the lateral thoracic artery. Lateral thoracic artery, right? It supplies blood to the lateral region of our thorax. Okay friends, this was about the branches of the second part. As I had told you, from the first part one artery, from the second part two arteries, first one, two, second, two arteries, and from the third part there are three branches of arteries which arise. Let me show all of them here. So let me write here branches of third part. So from third part of this artery, as we told you, there are three arteries which arise, right? This is the first one. You can see here, this is the first one, and here is the second one, and here is the third one, right? It's quite easy. The first artery which arises from this third part of this axillary artery is the subscapular artery, right? This is the subscapular. It arises from the subscapular region. That's why we call it subscapular artery. So let me write here subscapular artery. Right friends, this subscapular artery gives off two branches, right? It gives off, as you can see here, this one is going and making a circumflex around the scapula, right? And this one is going down. So this subscapular artery gives off two branches. Look carefully. This first branch which arises from it, and it moves back, towards the scapula. So it is making a circumflex. That's why we call it circumflex scapular artery, right? Let me write here is circumflex scapular artery, right? And this is the second one branch of it. It's coming down, and it is the thoracodorsal artery, right? It moves back a little, right? In the thorax region, it moves back. That's why we call it thoracodorsal artery, right? So this is the thoracodorsal artery, right? So this subscapular artery gives off two branches, the circumflex scapular artery. You can see here, I have made it a little bit as let me show here.